The history of colonialism is a tapestry woven with threads of exploitation, oppression, and violence. The French colonial legacy in Cameroon is no exception. It is a story marred by brutal massacres, systematic repression, and a calculated erasure of truth. This essay delves into the dark underbelly of French colonial rule in Cameroon, exposing the atrocities committed against the Cameroonian people. It explores the rise of resistance movements, the French government's brutal response, and the long-lasting consequences of this violent chapter in history. This is not just a story of the past, it is a story that continues to shape the present. The echoes of colonial violence reverberate in Cameroon's social, political, and economic landscape even today. By confronting this painful history, we begin the process of understanding its lasting impact and work towards a future where such atrocities are never repeated. The story of French colonialism in Cameroon is a stark reminder of the human cost of empire and the enduring legacy of violence and silence. Following World War I, Cameroon, a German colony since 1884, was divided between France and Britain under the League of Nations mandate system. This system, meant to guide former colonies towards independence, often served as a smokescreen for continued colonial exploitation. France, granted control over a larger portion of Cameroon, inherited a diverse and populous territory. It was rich in resources, strategically important, and ripe for exploitation under the French colonial machine. French rule in Cameroon was built on a foundation of economic extraction and political control. The French administration implemented policies designed to extract maximum profit from the colony, often at the expense of the indigenous population. Forced labor, discriminatory taxation, and the appropriation of land for cash crop cultivation became hallmarks of French colonial rule. The French administration imposed a system of forced labor, compelling Cameroonians to work on infrastructure projects, plantations, and in mines, often under brutal conditions. This system, justified as a form of civilizing mission, served as a cornerstone of French economic exploitation. The oppressive conditions under French rule ignited the flames of resistance in Cameroon. Various nationalist movements emerged, demanding self-determination and an end to colonial exploitation. Among these, the Union of the Peoples of Cameroon, founded in 1948, emerged as a powerful voice for independence. The UPC, led by charismatic figures like Ruben Omniobe, advocated for immediate independence and a unified Cameroon free from colonial rule. The UPC's message resonated deeply with the Cameroonian populace, who were increasingly disillusioned with French rule. The party gained widespread support, particularly among the peasantry and working class who bore the brunt of colonial oppression. This support, however, was seen as a direct threat to French authority and economic interests, leading to a brutal crackdown on the UPC and its supporters. The French administration, determined to maintain its grip on power, responded with force, setting the stage for a bloody conflict. Faced with the growing popularity of the UPC and its call for independence, the French administration resorted to increasingly repressive measures. In 1955, the French government outlawed the UPC, driving the party underground and forcing its leaders into hiding. This ban marked a turning point, signaling the French government's willingness to use any means necessary to crush dissent and maintain its colonial hold. The suppression of the UPC was swift and brutal. French forces, aided by local collaborators, launched a campaign of terror against suspected UPC members and sympathizers. Arbitrary arrests, torture, and extrajudicial killings became commonplace. Villages suspected of harboring UPC members were targeted, with homes burned, crops destroyed, and civilians terrorized. The French crackdown aimed not only to dismantle the UPC, but to instill fear in the population, deterring further resistance. Section 5. A Reign of Terror. The destruction of the Bamileke people. The Bamileke people, concentrated in the western grasslands of Cameroon, were particularly targeted in the French crackdown on the UPC. Seen as a stronghold of UPC support, the Bamileke region became the epicenter of French military brutality. The French army, under the command of General Pierre Barjot, unleashed a reign of terror on the Bamileke people between 1955 and 1965. Tens of thousands of Bamileke civilians were massacred in a systematic campaign of violence. Entire villages were razed to the ground, crops were destroyed, and livestock confiscated, leaving the population starving and displaced. The French military employed scorched earth tactics, aiming to break the back of the resistance by destroying the social and economic fabric of Bamileke society. The systematic nature of the violence, the targeting of civilians, and the scale of destruction point to a deliberate policy of collective punishment enacted by the French state. Section 6. The Yogandima Massacre, a chilling example of brutality. The Yogandima Massacre, which took place on March 2, 1960, stands as a chilling testament to the brutality of the French crackdown. On that day, French forces, along with Cameroonian troops under their command, descended upon the village of Yogandima. The village, suspected of harboring UPC fighters, was subjected to a horrific massacre. Men, women, and children were indiscriminately slaughtered, their bodies left to rot in the streets. The exact number of victims remains unknown, but estimates range from several hundred to over 1,000. The Yogandima massacre, while horrific, was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern of violence and repression that characterized the French response to the UPC uprising. Section 7. Erasing the past, France's complicity and cover-up. For decades, the French government downplayed, denied, and actively covered up the atrocities committed in Cameroon. Official accounts dismissed the violence as isolated incidents or justified them as necessary measures in the fight against terrorism. The French media, largely complicit in this silence, rarely reported on the events in Cameroon, diverting public attention to other colonial conflicts. This deliberate erasure of history allowed the perpetrators of these crimes to escape accountability and denied justice to the victims and their families. The French government's installation of Ahmadou Ahidjo, a pro-French leader, upon Cameroon's independence in 1960, further ensured the continuation of this silence. Ahidjo's regime, propped up by French economic and military aid, had no interest in unearthing the crimes of the colonial past. Section 8. A long overdue reckoning, Macron's acknowledgement. In recent years, there has been a growing movement within France and Cameroon to acknowledge and confront the dark legacy of French colonialism. Historians, activists, and descendants of victims have been demanding recognition, justice, and reparations. This pressure culminated in French President Emmanuel Macron's historic visit to Cameroon in July 2022. During his visit, Macron acknowledged the painful and tragic events of France's colonial past in Cameroon, marking a significant shift in the French government's stance. He also announced the opening of French colonial archives, paving the way for further investigation and a more complete understanding of the atrocities committed during this period. Section 9. Facing the shadows, the importance of historical reckoning. The process of reckoning with the past is complex, painful, and often met with resistance. However, it is an essential step towards healing the wounds of the past and building a more just and equitable future. The opening of French colonial archives offers a unique opportunity to delve deeper into this dark chapter of history. Further research is crucial to uncover the full extent of French colonial violence in Cameroon, to identify the victims, to understand the motivations and methods of the perpetrators, and to assess the long-term consequences of these atrocities. Only by confronting the shadows of the past can we hope to build a future where such horrors are never repeated.